Welcome to the Author Advantage series, a free 10-session course designed to help you succeed whether you're a first-time author or a New York Times bestseller. This is session 6, and our subject for today is cover designs. Specifically, we're going to review the elements and the essentials of a captivating book cover. After those two sections, I'll share tips for how you can pass off creative direction if you're choosing to work with a designer. But before we begin, let me explain some of my credentials related to this subject in particular. I've been on cover design committees for every publisher that employed me. When I worked for one of the big five publishers, I had to give creative direction for books including covers, dust jackets, and packaging. Things like clamshell cases and slip cases, J-wraps, O-wraps, and other types of packaging that books sometimes need. Over the last 5 years since starting Amplify Marketing Services, we've given cover direction for some of the most important new releases from our publishing partners. We've also provided feedback on cover options as they were being designed. All that to say, we have a lot of experience with book covers, and we're happy to share some of our best tips with you in this video. This isn't the longest session in the Author Advantage series, but it's very important because yes, people do judge a book by its cover. In fact, it's all they have by which they can judge a book. When shoppers are searching or browsing for their next great read on Amazon, all that they see is the cover, title, and price. When shoppers are browsing in retail stores, all they see is the book cover or sometimes just the spine of the book if it's on a shelf and the spine is facing out. And that has to compel them on its own to pick up the book, to investigate it, to look into it further. So the cover needs to communicate a lot. It needs to grab attention so that it stands out from all the other books, and it needs to look like it belongs alongside best-selling books in the same genre or category. It needs to communicate quality as though it was produced by a big five publishing house, even if that book is self-published. The cover design represents everything within the book, and so much of the success of your book will ride on the cover design choices that you make. Before we dive into the text elements and then the design elements of a captivating book cover, what options are out there for designing it? Well, you could do it yourself. You could have a friend with design chops who will do it for you on the cheap. You could turn to Fiverr or 99 Designs. You could hire a professional with experience in book cover designs, and some are even using AI to design their book covers. I strongly recommend not using AI for your final book cover. However, if it can be helpful with mocking up options for you to consider, in the mock-up stage, it can be helpful, but I don't recommend using any of them as your final book cover design. Unless you're an experienced book cover designer, I don't recommend doing it yourself. Same thing with your friends, unless one of them happens to be a professional book cover designer, I wouldn't recommend going with them. I don't recommend using Fiverr or 99 Designs either, although you will likely get better results from them than a friend who just has a little experience using Canva. But here again, these types of services like Fiverr and 99 Designs might help you with the mock-up stage, and often it helps to have a mock-up of your cover design in your book proposal if you want to work with a traditional publisher. So it could be a good idea to hire someone through one of these services just in order to give you ideas that you might not have thought of on your own. So those are the 5 options, and you can probably tell that my recommendation is to go with someone who is a professional, experienced book cover designer. This is not something that you want to cheap out on. If you've invested years of your life in writing a book, you want to make sure you get this right. So work with someone who's not only a designer, but an experienced book cover designer. They know how to design the front, they know how to design it in the file formats that are required for printers, and they have a history of designing covers that are compelling and captivating that they can share with you to prove that they know what they're doing. Now let's move on to the elements of a captivating book cover. There are text elements and there are design elements. We'll start with 7 text elements, and you don't have to have all 7 of them on your book cover, but they're available to you as options. So let's walk through these. First, you have your title. That's obvious. Now, the subtitle doesn't have to be on the book cover. It can just be on your title page, but sometimes it helps, and often it helps, to work that into your cover design. In session 4, we talked about how to choose a title, subtitle, and subtitle extension for your book. And if you remember, the subtitle extension is there to inform the reader about the content of the book and also to let Amazon's algorithm know when your book should show up in search results. Sometimes it can make sense, especially if you've really wordsmithed the art and science of copywriting and it flows naturally and is helpful to the reader. Sometimes that can make sense to include on your book cover. Not always, and quite often it won't work, but that's something you could have. Obviously, number four, you'd have your author name on the book cover. Sometimes a really good strategy for your book can be to seek out some connection that you have in your network who has a stronger digital platform than you do and ask them to write a foreword for your book. And if you do that, it could be good to include their name on the book cover saying forward by and then the name of that person. Another strategy that we've talked a lot about in this video series is the importance of securing endorsements for your book. If you get a good endorsement from someone with a strong platform or from anyone, but it's worded in a way that captures the essence of your book really well, you can put an excerpt of an endorsement on your book cover. And that can be a good decision. It isn't always a good decision, but it can be. And lastly, the seventh text element that can find its way onto your book cover is some type of a call out that draws attention to some features in your book, like a group discussion guide or companion videos that are with each of the chapters. If you have any type of bonus features or content, it can be a good idea to put them within some type of visual call out, a circle, a sunburst, or a ribbon or something that draws the eye to those extra features and makes your book stand out. There are four design elements to consider incorporating into your book cover. Simple patterns that are subtle in the background but give some texture to the book cover, but don't take away from the wording within your title and subtitle and author name. Photos can be incorporated into the background, especially if they have high contrast, are bright, and communicate the essence of your content. Icons or symbols that represent the nature of your content can also be helpful to implement in your cover design as a design element. And then seals, this would be any kind of award that you've won, any recognition that your book has received. This is more about a second printing, perhaps, after your book's already been out. But if your book has won any kind of award, it can really help validate that this book is worth reading by putting the seal that officially represents its honor on the book cover. Or if you've surpassed a certain number of sales, like 100,000 copies, are in print, that could be something to encapsulate within a seal or some type of a call out design element. So those seven text elements and four design elements are options that you have available to you to consider when you're considering the direction that you want to take with the book cover design. Now let's move on to the essentials, the best practices that should be implemented in every cover design. First, avoid trademarked phrases. This is something that I've seen happen in the publishing industry where a publisher goes to press and prints thousands of copies of a book and later realizes that within the title, subtitle, or tagline, there is a phrase that someone else has trademarked and they're prepared to defend their trademark. I've seen thousands of copies of books have to be destroyed or recovered because of this problem. So number one, make sure you avoid trademark phrases. And we have more detail about that in the session on choosing a title and subtitle for your book. Best practice number two is to confirm the readability of your book cover design as a thumbnail image. Take a look at Amazon and realize just how small the cover designs appear. That's all of the space your book has to communicate the nature of your content. So make sure that the words in your title and subtitle or in your subtitle extension, make sure they're legible as a thumbnail sized image. That might not be possible for every part of the text that you've implemented into your cover design, but make sure that the most important words can be read in a very small size. The third essential best practice is to guide the flow of the eye with the cover design. This involves avoiding clutter that just makes your eye not know where to land. This also involves the way that your text is placed, whether it's stacked or centered, and how one word flows into the next. And we want to guide the eye from the title to the subtitle while also making sure that the key design elements that are within the cover design are seen and clearly understood. There's a book that I love called Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, and it's about website interfaces and user experience on websites, but it applies to a book cover as well. Just like people need to be able to quickly land on a website and understand what it's about and what that website wants them to do, likewise, a book cover needs to be able to quickly communicate the content of the book in a compelling way. Without forcing them to have to think very deeply about it, they should be able to make a quick decision to pick your book up and thumb through it, or to click your book cover on the website instead of clicking someone else's book. The fourth essential best practice related to book cover designs is to align the look and feel of your book cover with the best-selling competitors in the same space. It should look like it belongs on the shelf next to the most popular books in the same category. It shouldn't look vastly different. I'm not saying that you should copycat anything that's out there, but take some time to browse through the relevant book categories on Amazon and just see what types of patterns are consistent. Do you see sans serif or serif fonts? How large is the title? How large is the author name? Are they more clean or are they busier? What type of design elements are incorporated? This is important to do for inspiration, but also to just make sure that you don't accidentally create something that looks like a competitor's book. This is something that I've seen multiple times in my career, where a really great design is chosen and they run with it, and after it's printed and in the warehouse, they realize that it looks way too much like another book. This can create all kinds of problems and just doesn't look good. So you want to know what others are doing so that you can draw inspiration from them, so that you can know what look and feel you should be similar to, but also so that you don't adopt a very similar design element or imagery in the background. Essential best practice number 5 is one that I almost forgot to include in this session, and that is to make sure that your cover design works as a square image as well. This is only true if you intend to have an audiobook version, and if that audiobook version is going to be in the Audible program. If you choose to have an audiobook in Audible, Amazon will prioritize that, and in the search results pages where your book is found to be relevant, the audiobook image is the one that will show, and when they click on it, they'll be taken to the audiobook format of your content, and if they want a Kindle edition or a print edition, they'll have to toggle over to that format to see it. So if you have an Audible audiobook edition, the square audiobook cover is actually the one that will be seen the most, and it's the one that needs to carry the message of your book in the most powerful way. So in some ways, that's the most important version. Make sure you design a cover that works in both formats, and that's not necessarily easy. Don't just add borders to the side of a 6:9 ratio cover. You need to fill the space completely so that you take full advantage of the real estate in that small thumbnail size. So I strongly encourage you not to make the square edition an afterthought. If anything, start with the square and work backwards from that to figure out a good design for your 6:9 ratio, or whichever ratio you end up printing in. The seventh and last essential best practice that we recommend is to create mock-ups of your book cover with a variety of layout options. This is a really helpful exercise for you as an author to do, even if you're not taking responsibility for the cover design of your book. It can actually help you decide on a title and subtitle and even a subtitle extension by seeing how it can be displayed on a book cover. Sometimes you'll realize that it's just far too long and it just doesn't work. It's too clunky and cluttered. Or other times you might see that if you just stack the words a certain way, it has a flow that guides the eye and really does a good job of communicating what you want people to see when they consider your book. So play with various layouts yourself, and this is also when you can incorporate some AI assistance or working with someone on Fiverr or 99designs.com. I would recommend doing this even if you're working with a traditional publisher. This can be a part of your book proposal, or it can be something that will help you as the author lead this conversation and guide this so that the end result is close to what you had envisioned before you started working with them. In just a moment, we're going to conclude with 7 tips for what you should have in your creative direction to pass off to a designer that will help set them up for success in designing what you've envisioned. But before we get to that, I just want to say something about the back cover copy, because this is important as well. If you've applied the best practices that we covered in the last session about your book's description specifically for Amazon, that often also works as the exact formatting and copy that should be in your back cover. If it's snackable and includes endorsements and short bullets that convey the content of your book clearly, then you can use the same copy in your back cover. There are cases where that just doesn't work, but in many cases it does. All right, let's conclude by this creative direction. I found that the more specific that you can be in your creative direction, the designer will be more informed and will be more able to give you options that align with your vision for the book. The first thing to communicate in your creative direction is to explain the tone and feel of your content. There are so many ways that you can describe the tone and feel of your book depending on what you've written. You could say that it's serious, that it's sophisticated, that it's playful, that it's witty, that it's edgy. Any type of word like that that describes the tone and the feel will be helpful as they decide how it should be represented in a design. I also like to use this but not that statements. I found these to be helpful when communicating to a designer more precisely what I'm looking for. Here's what I mean by this but not that. If you've already chosen words that describe the tone and feel, you can unpack that further here and say, I want it to be modern but not playful. I want it to be serious but not academic. I want it to be accessible but not silly. I want it to be scientific but not stuffy. Just think about those types of this but not that statements, and it will be helpful to your designer as they work on your cover design. Thirdly, include all of the text that are options to include on the cover and make sure that they know which ones are mandatory and which ones are options. Also give them a list of design elements, knowing that often they won't be able to incorporate more than one, but give them options. Give them a few symbols or examples of imagery that you think could best convey the content's tone and feel. Another way that you can help further refine your creative direction is to give them examples and specifically point out what you like about each example and what you don't. That will help them narrow in on the focus that you have for your book. Also explain the desired hierarchy of the elements that you've included in your list. Explain the path that you want the eye to take and let them decide the best ways in their design to accomplish that. And then also I encourage you to create some mock-ups, whether it's on your own using a tool like Canva or Adobe Express, or if you work with someone like Fiverr or 99 Designs, or if you use an AI tool to help mock up something. I recommend sending those along and explaining to them what parts you like and which parts are just there as filler because it's a mock-up. By the way, if you need some recommendations for experienced book cover designers, I've worked with many. I'd be happy to put you in touch with some of them. If you're interested, just contact me through my website at amplifymarketers.com. There are some rules that Amazon has for book cover designs, but there aren't very many. I'll put a link in the description so you can check those out for yourself. I also have a link in the description to one of my favorite free software tools for authors and people in the book publishing industry, and that's DIY book covers. This amazing tool is so easy to use. DIY book covers doesn't design your book cover, but it gives it a 3D rendering that can be really helpful to even further understand what your book will look like in a final format instead of just seeing a flat cover design. There are only a couple of steps in this awesome free tool. First, you just choose how you want this to be displayed in its rendering. You can choose a single book of different thickness. You can choose a hardcover or a paperback. And then you can do a combination of a book and an iPad or an iPhone or a tablet or smartphone. After you've chosen the format that you want your cover design to be rendered in, you upload your cover design file and then you click next and it just lets you download this as a JPEG or as a PNG file, which I always go for the PNG, as you can see in this example. They even have a free tool where you can then take that design that they've rendered and incorporate it into social images that you can use in your organic social posts or in paid ads. And they even just recently released a way for you to create a video that you can use based on that 3D rendering that they've made for you. Great tool, highly recommend that you use it and let any of your author friends know about it as well. In our next session, we're going to cover book marketing and advertising opportunities. We've invested millions of dollars at Amplify Marketing Services in many different ad platforms for authors and publishers, and I'm excited to share our experiences and advice with you in session 7. If you have any feedback or questions, please leave those in the comments on YouTube and also in our Facebook group. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you in session 7.